Welcome to the Dr. Frank and Steve podcast with your hosts, Dr. Frank Williams and Dr. Steve Snodgrass, MD, FACS, where we discuss a broad range of topics without limitations. Let's get to it. Here's Dr. Frank and Dr. Steve.
Hello, welcome back. This is the Dr. Frank and Steve podcast. I'm your host, Frank Williams, and this is my co-host, Dr. Steve Snodgrass, MD, FACS. Today, we're going to be covering sports gambling and its effect on your health, and along with several other areas, as we normally do. We're kind of a unique podcast in that we try and cover not only the medical and the health issues, but also statistical data, crime data, and as far as also religious implications and what many religions feel about the subjects. And we do our research because we do in-depth research, and we know that if you want to check any of our research, all you got to do is message us. We'll tell you where the sources are, but they're very easy to find. Most of them come from, the AMA, the NIH, FBI. So we use all accredited statistics and or information to do our podcast because we want to make sure we're giving you precise, clean, and correct information. We believe in facts, and the facts support the truth. Not our truth is our facts. There's a big difference.
There you go,
Steve.
That's right. Yeah.
Without further ado, I'll give you Steven Snodgrass here, aka Rockstar he's dressed as today. So we're ready to roll.
Thank you. I got a couple things that I want to say about some of the commentaries, and I want to start off with that. Number one, people had talked about our knife attack podcast and the violence in it and all that sort of thing. But when I read that thing about the stabbings in Hamburg, Germany, it's like, I know the latest thing I saw was like it's either 12 or 17. I've seen both of those numbers in 4 deaths. And so, what's more violent? To stop, just if someone had any kind of inkling, there's no way that 17 people should be stabbed and 4 people die from one 39-year-old woman with a knife. There's no way that should ever happen.
Agreed.
And people can say like, well, you're too violent, this is too violent. Well, I think she was too violent.
Yes.
So, it's just one of those things. We unapologetically will show people how to defend themselves because we're all about people who are minding their own business, being good citizens, not being hurt or killed.
That's correct.
So that's that. And then the other thing I want to talk about is the Man Up podcast, because it just seems to be, that we get a lot of commentary about that. That's good. But I can sum it up. I can sum that up in what this is what my grandma Snodgrass told me when I was a little boy. You want to hear it?
Yes, because you're going to tell it anyway, I'm sure that reinforces a lot of things I know about you.
It kind of says it in a nutshell. If you think about it, it's a very profound thing.
Yeah.
And but it's one of those things where I was a little kid, and she said, "Let me tell you, Sonny. As a boy who's going to grow into a man, there are going to be certain sets of circumstances that you're going to be faced with, and they're going to be difficult in nature a lot of times. And so that's the kind of times you have to go in, get yourself a big mirror, and look in that mirror, and you say, what kind of dinosaur am I? Are you a T-Rex, or are you a Pussylopotamus?" And those words stuck with me forever.
Yes. Feel free, you can order t-shirts from us. We actually do have those t-shirts.
I think that says it all, don't you? When you get right down to it, it says it all. Okay, so that's that. Now, on the sports gambling thing, as I get emails from so many different medical related entities, like just, the American Medical Association for one, the American College of Surgeons. And a lot of times we will choose our topics because they're identified as problems and they're not really being hit on in the mainstream media or legacy media, whatever you want to call
And
it.
you know what that is?
Yeah.
If you've got entities and marketers or companies wanting it not to be, and they're promoting those habits or situations because they make money off of it, you're not going to hear a lot because they're going to do everything they can to be paying those institutions, media, to make sure that their point of view gets across in commercials, and that anything that's detrimental to that and their bottom line is going to be left out.
Yeah, and so when we choose topics, we look at those kinds of things and like, well, these are cutting edge. What what it's really more futuristic in a lot of ways, and I feel like it's so important that we shine a light on all this.
Multiple of our podcasts have come out and been right at the cusp of what's getting ready to happen and what's starting to happen, and then it goes into full-blown emergencies or epidemics or that. And I'm not saying we can see the future, but we know, looking at the trends, as Steve says, with his medical research and notifications and the ones I get, and when they combine, and we say, man, there's a lot of this going on in the secular area, non-medical area or healthcare area, and it's also now, Steve says, well, I got something on it from the AMA or NI or whoever, JAMA for you, and this is becoming an issue or a problem, then we know that's probably something that's going to, as Steve said, that's going to be hitting out there. So we like being on the cutting edge. That's the kind of people we are.
Yeah, it is, and it's like a lot of these things that you see that we're talking about now will become headlines in the future. And so what we want to do is we want to show you all these things, and so you'll be aware of it. Obviously, sports gambling is just a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Oh, absolutely.
And I was just kind of, they said that the articles that I read in the medical literature that estimated almost $1.4 billion was wagered on the last Super Bowl, and over $3 billion in March Madness. And what's interesting is that the NCAA sent out notifications to warn losing gamblers not to harass the athletes. So,
wow,
it's that big of a problem, and I was just kind of like stunned to hear that. But when you think about it, it certainly makes sense. But there's many researchers now referring to this as a public health crisis, and it's not one that's been addressed sufficiently, and that's one of the reasons we want to cover it. But if you look at the studies, they've linked sports gambling to many other problems well beyond just the financial problems, but alcoholism or alcohol abuse, domestic violence, mental health issues. And so they're saying that the sports gambling, in regards to the implications of it and relating it to public health, that it's going unnoticed because it's just more accepted than a lot of other things. And so we want to focus attention on it. And so I saw where 38 states have legalized sports betting. And I didn't realize that China was the #1 country in regards to gambling, where they said reportedly over 60 million gambling addicts.
Yes. Now, some of the sports betting in the states that they're legal, some of those are through the tribal gaming operations. So it means through Native Americans through the casinos and their on-site betting and gaming things. And as you get into the health stuff, if you don't mind me interjecting.
No, it's time for you to come on in.
No, New York leads in gambling-related arrests, often tied to organized crime families. Being Italian, I can sympathize. And Interpol says they do about 5,100 arrests, and they've seized about $59 million in illegal football gambling, and just in their crackdowns of that betting. However, did you know that globally, illegal sports betting is a $1.7 trillion industry?
Wow.
1.7 trillion
Wow.
industry.
That's
the market worldwide, like you said, China, Singapore, you know, everywhere, even from Guam to Germany, Europe, you name it, Great Britain. There's, I mean, this has been going on obviously since the dawn of time, but it's something that, you know, has a major impact on people's health, because the psychological impacts on some of that and social impacts. It says about up to 3% of U.S. adults are addicted to gambling, with men accruing the most debt. The average debt for those 3% is $90,000 in gambling debt alone. So you're gonna have to answer to somebody. It says that 1 in 10 college students is a pathological gambler. You know, a gambling addiction, like I said, is linked to depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts. And then whoever you're betting on, like Steve said, people are getting out of hand about harassing and threatening these athletes, not only after they lose, but before they play the games. So how's that psychologically messing up your athlete? You know, and there's some key legislative developments that are going on here in the U.S. They're looking at the Safe Bet Act, which aims to regulate advertising, AI use in gambling, and ban like prop betting on college campuses. And then, you know, New York's proposing to ban credit card deposits and capping daily deposits you're allowed to make. South Carolina and Georgia, they've introduced bills to legalize and to actually tax your sports betting so that it can be tracked. So that's all to get that cash, obviously. You know, so looking at all that, you know, like Steve said, it can lead to substance abuse, neurological changes within your body, which is amazing. I know you're going to go over some of that.
Yeah, I'll go over
And then there are the, you know, religious aspects. And I know a lot of people say, well, it doesn't really talk about gambling in the Bible. Well, it doesn't necessarily talk about gambling, but there are things in the Bible that talk about it, because most times you're gambling, you're trying to get quick money or trying to get some money off something. So if you go to the Bible, and I'll quote the ESV version, it's, you know, you got like Proverbs 13, Hebrews 13:5, 1 Timothy 6:10, and Matthew 6:24. And a lot of these, and I can quote a couple of them if you want, like, keep your life free from love of money, for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. It doesn't say the root of evil, all kinds of evil. And you cannot serve God and money, that's Matthew, of course, and wealth gained hastily will dwindle. But if you grow your wealth step by step, not gambling step by step, but step by step, you know, that you'll live longer and it'll be more sustaining. And if you look at gamblers in general, as far as the denomination preferences, the Catholics are most likely to have gambled or do gamble. It's about 92%. Where Protestants are about 78%, with elderly Protestants being the lowest amount at about 55% have ever engaged in any type of gambling. You know, religion, a lot of times, this is from PubMed Central, basically, a medical journal, talks about there are usually factors built into being religious or, you know, Protestant, that help you cognitively stay away from those type of things, because it's viewed, even if it doesn't say anything, it's still viewed as a way that hurts your witness and, you know, can create problems within the family. So, and then you have like the Muslim population. That's considered a sin in the Muslim population, period, or in Islam, I should say. Gambling explicitly prohibited. I think it's called haram. Then Judaism, traditional teachings discourage gambling, and then Buddhism, gambling is viewed as a source of suffering, you know, and a creation of suffering. So just to give you a little overview of those different things. And so I wanted to cover some of those, and then we'll carry on as Steve carries on, as we always do, you know, but I don't know how people do that, because I've known people who will drop, and I've seen relatives, ain't no kin to me if they are, but on opposite sides of the family, I've seen them drop a few $100 on games and, maybe win a little bit and then lose some. I'll make it up on the next game. I'm like, if I walked in with my wife or you walked in and said, hey, honey, I just dropped $1,000 on the Lakers. Oh, they lost by 2 points. Well, we'll make it up on the next game. Here, I got this special arsenic and estrogen pill I'd like you to take.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
So,
and what's getting crazy is, if you look at some of these things, the gaming is broadening, if you will. It's like people are betting on minor league baseball,
yes,
cricket, what color Gatorade is going to be thrown on the coach, what are the coin flips, heads or tails, how long the national anthem will last. I mean, it's just bizarre in some of these things.
Yeah, and it's worse in the 18 to 34-year-old age groups because they're the ones most likely to engage in sports betting because there's such easy access to these mobile apps anymore, and that's all you see on TV. Sign up for this mobile app, get $200 or $500 instant betting credits.
Yeah, and the thing about it is that I read that psychologically that the younger people like 35 or younger, they believe that sports gambling is more skill than luck kind of thing, because they're really highly impulsive, so they think that because they follow a team and that sort of thing, and they watch them all the time, that they're familiar with that team, and so they feel comfortable betting on them. And you have to, one thing you have to understand, and we've said this many times, is that when you throw in humans, anything and everything can happen. Everything changes, and it's just like, I remember when I was doing my cadaver dissections in medical school and everything, and just talking about the human factor of it, and just like, you're doing all these dissections, and then somebody would say like, well, that's not as hard as it looks, is it? And I said like, well, cadavers, number one, cadavers won't bleed.
Right.
They won't bleed because they're already dead. So they won't bleed, and they won't sue, and their families aren't going to get mad at you and all that sort of thing for a bad result that's not your fault. So when you throw in the human aspect of things, everything changes. Everything. So that's just one example. But it's, and it's difficult to get data a lot of times on gambling related problems. So like if a person goes in and loses a substantial amount of money, and they're continuing losses to the point of where they shoot themselves in the head, for example.
$90,000 on average, that's a lot.
I mean, you think about it, it's a house in many ways. But it's like, the cause of death is listed as a gunshot wound to the head. But really,
the underlying factor.
The underlying factor is like you lost, your home on sports bet or whatever. You lost substantial money.
Widow's coming.
Yeah, and so those kinds of statistics are hard, to qualify, but you see it though, and so the researchers are calling this a natural experiment that's occurring out in real time. So
basically an epidemic.
Yeah, and it's just it will amplify emotional cues and can increase domestic violence, and also that there are increased suicides in some of these younger athletes because of the pressure about the gambling. So what we were talking about earlier, this was brought up in the Journal of the American Medical Association, that there's an increased risk in suicide in those groups of athletes, like the high-level athletes. So, and the other thing too, if you consider like alcoholism and drinking, abuse and addiction and all that sort of thing, if you look at driving under the influence is one thing, but gambling under the influence is yet another thing. Because how many people get drunk and then say, you know what, I just got a feeling about this team, and I'm here and I've got my computer with me, or I'm in Vegas or wherever, Macau, whatever. And it's like, yeah, I've been drinking some. And they encourage that, as you know.
Oh, absolutely.
They encourage you to drink at all those casinos and all that sort of thing. But it's like gambling while under the influence. Again, they just don't mix.
No.
They just don't mix.
Well, I know statistically it says that youth are more prone to impulsivity and peer pressure from people. And under the age of 18, the younger they start gambling, and people are shocked to find out that, youth under 18 actually gamble. They do. They'll create fake accounts and do, whatever they want to do if they think they're going to make that cash, or get out there with the bookies and stuff at early ages. That early exposure for those children can lead to a lifelong addiction of gambling, period, which then leads into, like you said, can lead into other addictions, substance abuse, alcohol abuse, spousal abuse, child abuse, because they have to have coping mechanisms to deal with when they have losses.
Yeah, and one of the things that was from the Journal of the American Medical Association Pediatrics, and they were just talking about how gambling is a major problem in grades 8 through 11.
Now, isn't that amazing?
That's amazing. So it's like, my point on it, well, think about how young that is, and you basically have a casino in your pocket.
Well, yeah, absolutely. That's what I said. When some relatives are around, they're like, "Oh, if you get on this app, they'll give you $200 or $250 or $500." And I said, "How can they afford to give you $500 up front? What if you only use that $500 and you sign up for an account and then you're done after that?" They said, "Well, you've got to do something to trigger it, but no, once you get on there and you start making a little money, you're going to want to keep doing it."
Oh, yeah.
No, be my luck on gambling, because I don't gamble, that I said, "Oh, wow, I'm going to stick $500 or $5,000 on this team. That star player has been so hot the last 3 games." And then you're sitting there watching TV, you're watching your ESPN or whatever, all of a sudden, Don Johnson, star player, twisted his ankle coming out of the locker room. He'll be sitting the bench tonight.
Well, being from Kentucky, and I went to med school at University of Kentucky, and Keeneland race tracks there. Mm-hmm. And so obviously, one of the big days is to go like to a Keeneland race day and then go to a University of Kentucky football game at night. I mean, it just makes for, a big day, that sort of thing. But I remember, I was a med student and I was looking at this horse and I just said, like, that is like heads and shoulders above the other horses in this race as far as just being big, mm-hmm. muscular, and it was the son of Secretary. And Secretary, I think, by the way, is the greatest athlete in history. But anyway, that aside, I said, look, you know what? That horse, there's no way that horse is going to lose. Because, like, I'm looking at the rest of these nags in here, and, like, that horse is so far ahead of them in physical appearance and had won all these races and was just clearly the class of the race. So I bet, for me, I think it was like $100 to win, place, or show or whatever. Just like, that to me, that was going to be my big bet of the day. So as soon as the starting gate opened, the horse stumbled and finished last. So there you have it.
Oops.
There you go. I mean, so again, there's no way.
No.
When I say like humans involved, same kind of thing. When animals are involved, you just don't know.
And that's not a skill you're learning on. That's luck.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just like, and one of the things that what we were talking about earlier, the gambling addiction has similarities to substance abuse and use disorders such as alcoholism. And so gambling addiction is classified as substance-related and addictive disorder in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorder, 5th edition, or DSM-5. So it is classified.
Is that because it releases the brain? It acts like the brain's reward system. What is it? Dopamine. Dopamine.
Oh, we're going to hit it all, Francois.
Okay.
We're going to hit all this.
Okay.
You just tell me when you're ready.
I'm ready.
All right. Okay. So, sports gambling affects the human brain like drugs in many ways, and it stimulates the brain's reward system and its decision-making system. And I found this, like, obviously I didn't know any of this. I just had to research it all, but it's pretty fascinating research when you look at it. But there's a place in the brain. All these are areas in the brain. One is called the nucleus accumbens or cumbens, and it's the reward center, and it releases dopamine when you win, or even when you anticipate a win. It releases dopamine. So it's like you're on this high before the thing even starts.
So that can lead, I would think, can that lead to like tolerance? And what I mean by this, tolerance and making it more acceptable to increase your bidding or to put more money out?
Oh, it certainly plays a role in it, because I mean you're basically on a natural high.
Yeah.
And so the same region is activated during sex, drug use, and eating like a meal that you love. So it's a reward center in the brain that's from sports gambling.
Wow.
And in the prefrontal cortex is the decision-making area of the brain, and it makes it, it's an impulse control area. And this area is responsible for reasoning, planning, self-control. In gambling addicts, this area becomes less active. And so it leads to impulsive decision-making and difficulty stopping even when the losses accumulate. So it just shows you how this is truly a neurological issue. And the amygdala is responsible for emotional processing and engages the processing of fear and reward anticipation. And when gamblers come close to winning, even like near misses, the amygdala reacts as if they're almost succeeding. They're that close. And so it just fuels continued play.
Would drive you to say, man, I was that close.
Yeah.
I know I'm right there. I can do it.
Yeah. And so it's like, all it does is just say like, okay, it reinforces that whole thing of going like, I came so close. And because
missed it by that.
Exactly. Exactly. Get smart kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's like, but that's amazing to me, is like, even a near win or near miss or whatever, it just fuels the fire to continue. And in a place called the insula is responsible for subjective feelings and cravings. It's believed to give rise to the gut feeling, or feeling lucky or unlucky. And that's part of the brain. So overactivity in the insula makes people overestimate their chances and hold their rational beliefs. They think that they're due for a win. It's like, well, I've had so many losses, I'm just due. And it's called the gambler's fallacy. It's actually given a name. And some of the reasons why sports gambling is so addictive is because they're just variable rewards schedules. The brain is stimulated more by uncertain rewards than guaranteed ones. So it's a very complex biological issue. And so the sports bets are unpredictable and they're irregular, and it makes it thrilling and hard to quit. So there's an illusion of control. And so gamblers feel like their knowledge of sports will give them an edge.
Wow.
And so really, your average bettor, they have no idea what goes on in the actual playing field at that level, or the court, or they have no idea of what goes on inside an athlete's head. I mean, my son played pro baseball, and they had sports psychologists counsel all those athletes and everything.
Wow.
So there's a lot of human factors in all of this, and when you're laying your money down, you're not just betting on just some sports event. There's so many things that make up that sport event. Like, is your star player or hurt, or are they hurt physically or emotionally? All of those kind of things come into play, and you don't have any idea about the truth on it. And the other thing too is there's so much social and cultural reinforcement. So it's often looked at as just being socially acceptable.
Well, it's because you have every celebrity and their brother
Yeah.
pushing these gambling apps.
Yeah. And it makes it a normalized environment. I think 94% or so of the gambling takes place online now.
It does, because I even read where, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it causes a lot of sleep disorders because a lot of people get stressed out over their gambling. And then when they do that late at night, like late night mobile gambling causes all kinds of sleep disorders, cognitive decline, hypertension, can cause heart disease from the stress, digestive issues, and can even weaken the immune systems because of being so stressed over their gambling.
Oh, absolutely. And there's the thing it's called like a rapid escalation, where a few bets can quickly spiral into compulsive behavior because of what we talked about in this human brain and reward center. But financial ruin, unlike substance addiction, the consequences are often immediate and financially devastating.
And there are people who can handle it. I was with some relatives and we went into a local casino here, but we were going in there to eat because they kept raving about the cafeteria or whatever, the restaurant in there, how great it was. So I agreed to go in because my 96-year-old father-in-law wanted to go in there. So we went, and I watched one of them, because it's scarring me, I wouldn't be able to do those machines that make me sick. But I watched one of them take $100 and $20 bills and just feed that. And they said, "Oh, got so close. Oh, you ain't gonna win over me. This machine's gotta get hot." And just kept pumping them in. I got back and I said, the next time I ever hear you complain about how much shoes are for your kid or this and that, you just remember this. You just blew a pair of shoes for your kid, basically.
Yeah.
And didn't think twice about it. Well, I might go back if we got time and do a little bit more. I said, you do whatever you feel you need to. We're getting out of here, after we ate. And then the food was okay, but it wasn't nothing to write home about. That's why I'm not saying the name of the place so they don't, get mad, which would be a mistake on their part. But I've seen that firsthand. I've seen, we used to do charities in Ohio. I'd go to charities like with relatives and people when they would have the big casino nights, and people would go ballistic. I watched a guy now this guy was good. He owned a construction company and took like 20 of his employees on this cruise. And this was a high-end cruise my wife and I went on with my in-laws. And I watched this guy when we got to international waters. I did gamble that time because I played nickels. I had like $5 in nickels in the nickel slots, and I came back with 35 cents in nickels. But the guy, I just sat and watched the guy for like 3 nights for about an hour each time while my in-laws were doing their little quarter and nickel slots. But this guy was laying down hundreds and thousands. And the first night the guy won 10,000. Second night he won 30,000. The third night, I think he ended up winning about $50,000 in gambling off that. The guy was good and he knew what to do, when to do it. And I thought, but some of his employees thought they would stay on board with him, and try and keep up at a smaller pace. And they weren't. A couple of them like, man, I'm just losing here. And the guy says, you just got to know how to do it. That I do think is a skill when they do that, certain card games. But this guy obviously had the cash to blow and didn't mind blowing it, but he didn't lose it. He actually made money because he actually said, hey, I just paid for my whole company's vacation. And but I watched several of them though go through like $1,000, $2,000, and I'm going, man, that's a lot of money just to lay those $100 bills down or 50s, and all of a sudden that guy just take them and go down in the little hole.
Yeah. Well, I remember being out in Vegas when I was out there to watch a professional fight, and just in the casino.
Never been.
But I was in a casino, and I think I've mentioned this before on a podcast. But anyway, there was this old guy there. I mean, he was like, I'm going to say had to be in his 80s. I mean, he was an old guy, and he had like a woman on each arm, and obviously like they were probably in their 20s or something. So this guy was at the craps table, and he bet $40,000 on 8 the hard way. So he's betting 40 grand that the next roll of dice will be 2 4s, and he lost it, and then he did it again, and he lost again. He lost $80,000 in about a minute and a half, and then the people looked at him, and he goes, "Easy come, easy go."
He must have been worth some money.
But he lost $80,000, and how long does it take for somebody to roll a couple of rolls of dice on the craps table?
That's a lot.
He lost 80 grand.
Because about 10 years ago, almost 11, I had a private client that I trained because he wanted to make sure he could take care of himself for about a year, and we worked hand-to-hand combat. He was a professional gambler. Now this kid, and I say kid because he was 24 years old, he drove a Ferrari, would drive it up to the dojo here in Bowling Green, and then he had a $1,000 chip hanging around his neck. And we always had it on Fridays. Every Friday he'd come in on like a Tuesday and a Friday and work out in the mornings, and drop the girls off at school. Then we'd had our lessons, and he was such a friendly guy. He looked like Josh Groban to me. That's kind of what we reminded us. Josh Groban was a gambler, but he would come in and go. I'd say, "Hey, how'd you?" He said, "Well, I can't be here this Friday. I just got invited to go back out to Vegas. They're going to fly me out and give me $25,000 in chips to start with." I said, "Oh, I thought he was making that up." Until I talked to another guy who said, "No, if you're a heavy high roller, they'll fly you out, put you up, comp your room, comp everything, and they give you stuff to start with." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because they expect them to hopefully lose 5-10 times that amount." And he'd come back and I'd say, "How'd you do?" He said, "Well, I broke even." He said, "Most of the time I make money, but the majority of the times when he would go away, and it happened several times over that year, he'd come back and say, I made like 40 grand. I made 70 grand. I said, "Wait a minute, this is like the second time this month you're gone. You tell me you made 150,000 just on a weekend?" He said, "Yeah, I was running a hot streak, and I just kept going with it." He said, "I'm pretty conservative, but I like to do that." And I'm going, there is no way. Because he brought me back a couple chips, like a $50 chip and a $100 chip. And I said, he says, "Oh no, this is my lucky chip here. That's the first 1,000 I made, and I want to put it in a chip. And so I just wear it as my good luck charm." And he had a $1,000 chip on his key ring.
Well, there
and
you
I
go.
said, "Those aren't real, are they?" He goes, "Absolutely."
Yeah.
He said, "Well, if you lose your keys here, they're going lost and found. It's what's lost here stays here."
What's interesting, I saw where, like, if you look at gamblers, like who play cards and all the other forms of gambling.
You got mahjong, you got
sports bettors are the highest risk takers, and they drink more than people who gamble with cards and stuff.
Because they're more skilled.
Yeah, so there you go.
They have to be in more control.
So the other thing too. There's a lot of comorbidity. What you talked about. So you can have depression and anxiety and substance abuse, and you couple that with a gambling addiction, and you got yourself a really nice toxic stew.
Oh, absolutely.
And there's different treatment. Treatment resistance is that a lot of people don't seek help because they don't see it as a real addiction or a real problem. So they don't seek help. And so that's one of the things that I want to say in this podcast. If you're out there and you're listening to this and you feel like if you sit down and just assess where you are in life, and you think you have a problem here, get help. Just to get help. And the sports gambling will hijack the brain's reward system. It impairs self-control, makes it a neurological trap for susceptible individuals. And it's driven by a mix of neurochemical responses, cognitive distortions, and social acceptance. And when you put that all together, that's just a potential massive problem.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so how to treat it, cognitive behavioral therapy is the gold standard treatment. So basically just psychotherapy. It helps to reframe thoughts and build healthier behavior patterns. There's a thing called motivational interviewing. It's another kind of psychotherapy that focuses on the reasoning and helping you quit and strengthens the individual own motivation for change. Group therapy can be like Gamblers Anonymous. It can also help. And there are medications that are being used, even though there's no FDA approved medicine specifically for gambling addiction. But naltrexone is a drug that is used for alcohol and opioid addiction, and sometimes it's used in gambling addiction because it blocks opioid receptors in the brain reward center, and it reduces the urge and intensity and frequency of gambling. And the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs, are antidepressants that they are being used sometimes when gambling addiction is coupled again with a comorbidity of depression and anxiety. And there's also mood stabilizers such as lithium that are being used in this arena. But so gambling addiction is a neurologically real entity, and it's behaviorally complex and psychologically painful, but it's very treatable. The key, like anything, it's early detection with non-judgmental support and to approach it rationally and get help. And one of the things, we always have like some take-home points, that sort of thing. One of them is obviously if you feel like you or a friend or a family member is having a problem, it's good to talk about it and get them help. And one of the things that I feel is so extremely important, especially I had no idea that gambling was such a problem in grades 8 through 11. I had no idea.
That's crazy.
I had no idea. So it just reinforces the whole thing about like, as a parent, you need to know what your child's online activity is. And some say, oh, it's intrusive or whatever. Yeah, it is. And it's intrusive for a reason.
Yes.
You have to act like the mature adult, and you have to see what's going on, because your kid could rack up incredible debt.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's another thing that I feel like, now I'm going to say, I do not want it outlawed. I don't want it outlawed. I don't want cigarettes to be outlawed or alcohol to be outlawed. But I think that people need to know what they're getting into.
Right.
How many times have we said it in our podcast? Informed consent. As long as you know some of these things and you still engage in the behavior, you at least have some background knowledge of it. If you think like, before this podcast, you had no idea about how neurologically complex gambling and sports gambling really are, you might have a second thought before you engage in that behavior. And that's all we're trying to do, is give you knowledge, awareness, and let you make the decisions yourself, but you know what you're getting into. And one of the things that I would do is I certainly would not allow gambling to be allowed on a credit card. If it's a debit card or something like that, that's one thing. But a credit card,
right,
you lose money. Let's just say that you bet $1,000 with your credit card.
You're double losing.
And you lost your event. Now you've got $1,000 worth with credit card debt that's accumulating interest. So I think that should be against the law. I think you should not be allowed to gamble on a credit card. So,
I agree 100%.
So that's just some of the things that I took away from all this, but that's all I got for today's episode.
Yes, I think we covered quite a bit. Like I said, the only thing I would add to that is if you're a spouse or a girlfriend of somebody and they're getting a little too hot and heavy and they say, I'd really like to get some help, but I don't think I want to, with the psychotherapy stuff, buy a taser. And every time they get on that app, shock them. I think that would help.
That's one way to look at
it. Yeah.
But anyway, I think this is a topic, when the Journal of the American Medical Association starts mentioning it as this is a health crisis that people are not really talking about like they should.
Well, and it's going to become more prevalent, like you said, over the last maybe 12 to 18 months, and I'm going to say in the last 12 months especially, online gambling apps have exploded.
Yeah.
They're all over, streaming and even just, the mainstream networks. It's incredible the amount that you see on there. And I'm like, wow, man, they just push this stuff. I mean, it might be 5 commercials in a 1 or 2 hour time frame, kind of like drug commercials. I think both of them ought to be outlawed because I don't like drug commercials either.
No.
You don't need to go into your doctor thinking you need something that's not even for for your gender, that's specific for something else because you heard it on a medical and they're pushing it, but they don't tell you what it's actually for on these commercials. And I can't stand drug commercials anyway. I think they're ridiculous.
Well, and the other thing for me, I'll end by saying this, again, what kind of dinosaur are you?
Well, with that, we look forward to the next podcast. So stay healthy, stay safe, and we will see you.
See you later.
Thanks for listening to the Dr. Frank and Steve podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit follow or subscribe on the link provided so you can stay up to date on new episodes. Until next time, stay healthy and stay safe.